Welcome today. I am Rachel from Bookstore, and today we have an honor guest, a guest of honor with us, who is the author of this book, right? How the Man in Green Saved Pahang, Possibly the World. The author, Mr. Joshua Kam, with us today. Thank you, Joshua, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Joshua is actually talking to us all the way in the US now. First of all, can you tell us a bit about yourself? You know, what is your background?
Yeah, that's always a good place to start. So I am a KLite. I am not technically from Pahang, and I'm going to say that right off the bat because I think a lot of folks are like really coping, like, I've got some like nice rao with the Malo history, and I'm like, nope, my dad's from Kuantan though, which is kind of where, like, at least on his side of the family, that's where a lot of my very Cantonese, very Pahang Chinese family of metalsmiths became eventually moved to KL, and I spent, of course, a lot of time during Chinese New Year going back to Kuantan, so I spent enough time there to capture the feel of it. And I think what was particularly interesting for me is that my dad was very insistent on teaching me, I guess, a kind of like heritage, like a kind of this sort of extended heritage walk. So we go back to Chinese New Year and do all the traditional things, right, for all your family members. But then when we go to the beach, or he would take us like around the countryside, like up to Cherating and then south again. He would talk about like the history of like his childhood history in these places, and about like the myths and legends he heard from like Layu fishermen on the side of the street, like Chinese like Hakka storekeepers, like everything. And he would do his best to like root me in these things.
That's good.
And I'm very thankful for that heritage, right? Because I think you either get the parents who are very quick to like try to westernize their kids, which maybe I'm also a product of. But yeah, my dad has rooted me in that. In the way my mom has done that, but that's for like the Penang Hokkien side lah. So
right. So you get the best of both worlds.
I hope the best.
Yeah, because a lot of stories and myths and stories like these, they get I think with every generation, a small part kind of get lost.
Right.
Because
really
if we don't make a conscious effort in passing all these stories down, eventually we're gonna be left with very, very few stories and not much to talk about.
Right.
So I think that's a very nice thing to do. And I understand that you are homeschooled. Your parents homeschooled you?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, my mother is and was incredibly dedicated. She's she's brilliantly gifted and decided that she really wanted to teach her two sons, and that's kind of what happened.
It's quite unheard of in those days.
Yeah,
right? Were you the only one?
Back in the early 2000s, there were actually quite a few families, but like by quite a few, we mean maybe like 70 families in the Klang Valley. So it's like very tight-knit of a social group. So I did get to socialize as a kid, but it was definitely a very countercultural thing in some ways. My mom really definitely shouldered the weight of that, because I think in the same way that my dad taught me stories of like Kuantan while we were there, and like on the road trips back and forth, back when like the East-West Highway was like a 5-hour ordeal, if you still remember that. Well, on the other hand, I think my mom's general philosophy is that you really don't stop learning, and because like there is no classroom if you're homeschooled, everything is a classroom.
Yeah.
And of course, like 7-year-old me, maybe I would have hated it a bit more, but now that I look back, I realize that I think she gave me the rudimentary ways of looking at the world that allow me to treat it if not as a classroom, then as just a book that you're constantly searching through. And that's given me a lot of courage and
I think homeschool sounds interesting to me. I mean, I went to a conventional school, but I think it's the fact that there is no classroom sounds really nice to me. It's like you don't really have a fixed time that you must get up at this time. And I'm sure there are disciplines that, your mom would follow.
So my mom's philosophy was, on one hand, it was very like, she would say as in like, okay, so you have until the end of the month to complete X, or you have the whole year to complete so many books, maybe 30, 40, whatever, and do all. And then like math, we just use Borrow Singapore Maths because, well, obviously. But everything else was just like you have 1 year to like finish your thing, and if you don't get it in that time, you're just gonna have to work double time in December or whatnot, and you just won't get your holiday. And I'm like, you know that.
Wow.
It was.
Wow.
It taught me a lot of discipline at a fairly young age. There was a lot of ironing kinks out, and I was like by no means the best student. But my mom really wanted me to like figure out. It's like time management is an education itself, right? And learning how to like control that if you have that privilege is a useful skill lah.
And to give that to let you be in charge of your time and your own pace of learning, and giving you the responsibility from young. I think that's a very good way to teach children from young.
Thank you.
Yeah. So did your mom make you read a lot when you were small?
Yes. I think
did you just pick up books and start reading yourself?
I mean, yes and no, because I think on one hand I do like reading, but I think there's also like a certain amount of like, I stand on the shoulders of giants, that my mom was the one who went out to like all those like secondhand books and got like these Newbery medals, like the classics that you can't get very cheaply otherwise. And she would just spend hours in these like bookstores. So in that sense, yes, sometimes I would just pick up a book and read, but that comes out of the privilege of being in a house with lots and lots of books and like good books. And that's entirely on my mom.
Okay, that's great. So now I'd like to know, let's talk about your book now.
Okay.
Like I said, this is not something that we normally see, and especially when it's based in this region, and there are so many myths and folklores that we are familiar with. So what inspired you to write the book and to be in this style?
Ooh. So as I in undergraduate and eventually graduate, I decided to do study Southeast Asian history, and like specifically how folklore, food, and history all sort of like intersect, which kind of is how. And I spent the summer of like sophomore year, like second year, in the University of Michigan. I was just doing a month of research, and I was studying Hikayat Hang Tuah.
Okay.
And I remember during that period where I was just doing a lot of, sort of like pouring through some of the Malay again and trying to grease my language gears and like write something that's vaguely comprehensible, feeling as if I had almost missed out, because I think this is something where I'm trying to be like reflective because on one hand, I was very privileged to get the very Western style education I got.
Yes.
I got to read a lot of those, like the classic books that like those feels like I think those are great because I love that canon. I grew up with that. Yes. I think one of the things that's also challenging is that, but we also have a canon too that's very sophisticated, and I think that we don't have to choose between both. We can have them. And I think what happens is that I think what happens in many cases for people who have read Hikayat Hang Tuah or who are forced to in like high school or whatnot, there's this sense of like, oh gosh, like maka this, maka that, and it's easy to get burdened down by the story. But I had the chance to read this in a very a pressured setting, but a setting where I had 8 hours a day just to read this and like soak it in. And for me, it was good. And I feel like one of the figures that particularly pops out in like Hikayat Hang Tuah, in between all like the battles and like the fights and the duels one-on-one, there's this like Sufi prophet named Nabi Khidir, who's this, he always wears green, and he pops up in a lot of Hikayat, and he pops up throughout like the Islamic world's like literary tradition. And he goes, and he says and he's known for creating gifts of peacemaking, for lack of a better word. He finds ways to prevent wars or to bring brothers together again. And he does so often through essentially what we would call magic. I'm not sure if Sufi practitioners of like Sufi traditions would say the same thing, but we would look at that and call it magic. Trees and fish that talk, and trees that you put them in the ground and they bloom up in 1 second. That kind of the idea that mysticism is a way of rewriting the narratives, because like the Hikayat don't just float in as not as pure fantasy, because they were always written in a certain time and place where writers are thinking about colonialism or about when their next meal is coming or what will happen to the kingdom in the next 20 years. But they're still trying to write beautiful stories. And I think for me, Nabi Khidir, the Green Prophet, very much emblemizes the aspirations of Malaysians past, if we can use that term, right? Because I wasn't in Malaysia then, but so the inspiration for the book, long story short, was in the same way that Nabi Khidir keeps jumping into Malaccan history, I was very curious what would happen if he jumped into KL's and modern Pahang's history today. What would he see or do? What would he change? What would make him very angry? What wouldn't? And I guess the story began from there.
Okay, well, he is certainly a very interesting character. He's almost like a superhero that, saving the days, helping people. Right.
One hopes. I think I also wrote the book in a way as a critique of the myth of the superhero as well. I won't spoil too much. I don't know where you are.
Oh, okay. Still quite early on, but
Good.
A friend of mine who is ahead of me was telling me, spoiling some plots for me, and I love spoilers, so I don't mind. But
like
I thought this is bizarre. I mean, in a good way. I thought this is bizarre, but there is more waiting for me, and it's really kind of like, what? You mean there's more? So yeah, actually, looking forward to finish the book.
Yeah, thank you.
There's what I noticed is that there's a lot of elements that you included in the book.
Yes.
So obviously there are politics. There is mention of our ex-PM. The name Najib came up, and we have obviously the myth and the folklore, and there's a lot of religion, elements in it as well. And I was surprised to actually see some LGBT element as well. So he really has got everything in one book.
Trying to offend everyone, right?
Yes, I was thinking to myself. In fact, I think today I was speaking to one of my friends. I was saying that he's got a lot of interesting elements, put together. And do you have a bit of worries that this might offend the wrong people or the right people that might
get that's a good wrong people or right people, right? I think that's a very good question. I have considered that. I think I'm not purposely writing to offend people. I think what I want to tell is a beautiful story that tells stories of beautiful. Well, I'd like to tell. I'm trying to tell a beautiful story. Whether I do or not, I leave to the readers. Particularly about beautiful people that don't get talked about very often. And I think, especially in the Malaysian context, or when it's done, it's often through the lens of Westernness as a concept. And I'm like, but I wanted to write a story of people that I knew growing up who were not highfalutin people. Some had Western education, some didn't. And I learned so much from them. And I think in some ways, this is I'm almost writing for those people that I owe so much of my life to, than to purposely make some political commentary. If someone reads that and says oh yeah, maybe I agree or disagree, and I have reasons, and perhaps even if they feel hurt or offended, because I'm dealing with a lot of traditions and I need to be sensitive. I'm not Malay, and I'm not going to be able to write all of Malay culture authoritatively. I should not be that voice. But which is perhaps why I spoke more critically and more about the Chinese storyline, for lack of a better word, of one auntie who joined the emergency, because this is exactly my own ethnicity and family, and I get to say more about it.
Yeah.
But not trying to hurt people. That doesn't mean I'm not going to hurt people. And I don't think that should be an excuse if I do something wrong and I get called out later. You know, like if I get cancelled in the next 6 months, maybe there's a good reason. You know, yeah, a statement from me. But
no, hopefully not. I think I mean, there's some of these issues or elements are definitely sensitive to some people.
Right.
But I like to think that, you know, with literature, you know, we should be able to be open-minded and, you know, explore a bit, even though sometimes it makes us a bit uncomfortable. I personally think that, you know, especially as adults, we should be able to agree to disagree and respect each other. So I hope, you know, all the readers reading your books would follow this and, you know, not see any trouble coming your way.
I mean, I think people for sure will disagree, or some people may. And I think that's because, in my opinion, a good sign, at least in Malaysia, which means someone still cares about the classics. Yeah. If you're willing to get mad about like how someone interprets Hikayat Hang Tuah or characters in like HHT, that means you care about this like tradition enough. We both share this large, very mixed and very diverse Malay and Malaysian corpus of writings and ideas, and we're still in that conversation. And at least in the Malaysian context, I think that's so important because I think there's often there's this very sharp division between like, oh yeah, these are the modern westernized or very like Sinophile, like Malaysians who don't have any connection with, you know, our traditional past. You know, what does that even mean? And I want to say, no, that we can have this conversation set in our own country, on our own Tanah Air, without feeling that we have to agree on everything.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. This book won you an award, right? And you are the youngest winner of let me get this correct. You're the youngest winner of Epigram Books Fiction Prize. You were 23 when you won this prize?
Still 23.
Still? Okay, I read somewhere that you're 24.
Yeah, in October. I'm a good Libra.
Oh, okay, right. Still a few months away. So 23 years old and you already won a book prize. How do you feel? Is this something that you dream about, something that you work towards, or it's just like, oh, award, yay?
I think as a child, I definitely wanted to like write some book, and I tried a few times, finished a couple, but like they weren't very good novels, which I'm like, they will never see the light of day. And I'm quite okay with that. But right now, I think I kind of like shelved fiction, you know, wordplay intended, in my mind until like right around like after I graduated. I'd done a little bit of I think this was in 2017, and maybe this is me being very outside looking in, but this was, you know, after the Trump election in America, and seeing how a lot of people that, you know, while I was a scholarship kid, I was very fortunate to study where I studied. It was a conservative school in a conservative area. And I think it was interesting seeing a lot of that and how a lot of the discourse in America was being mirrored or was mirroring what I, you know, was seeing the conversations that have happened in Malaysia before. And it was this time of the winter of my discontent, or whatever I'm supposed to say. And and I think out of that came out a lot of desire to start writing stories that gave me hope. Particularly in the context of the things I studied, which is myth and literature. And I think I wanted to write something. I graduated. I spent like 3 months in between jobs, 4 months. And so I hid in my mom's study for a little while and wrote lots of those things. Wrote out the first draft and then started my job and worked there for a year and whatnot. But and it was also my mom who sent me the Epigram Prize information. So that's why she got
so dedicated. Supportive.
She is incredibly supportive. It always kind of shocks me how I lucked out in that department.
Yes.
But it also lets me know that none of this is somehow something that I can take too much credit for.
well,
not too
you're
much.
gonna take credit when it's due to you.
When it is due.
You know? and I think you deserve a lot of credit because the book is your idea. You wrote it, you know, and your mom probably sent you the Epigram Prize in full, but you know your book's got to be good enough for the judges to pick you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So now I think your story about yourself, you know, being a young writer that debut novel actually won an award. It's very inspiring. And do you have any plan to write more? What is the plan now?
No, I appreciate that you phrased it that way, see, because like someone else, one of the interviews, like, actually, what's your second book? I'm like, oh wow, presumptuous of you to hope that I still have something in me to write.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
You know, some writers are one-trick ponies, and you know, maybe I might be one. I don't know, but I think for me right now, I was supposed to be doing in Indonesia this time of year, doing more research. Of course, coronavirus, you know, I don't need to explain this, so like I can't be there. So I ended up spending a lot of time in like the spring doing my classes and then just taking long walks in like southeastern Michigan and learning about the natural history here and like also Asian diaspora history here. That might actually be the next site. I think I'm writing about environmental decay and like Southeast Asians in this part of the country of the US. So it might be a US based story, but I want to root it in Southeast Asian people.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Okay. Next question is, we'd like to know about how did you get into writing? We know that you read a lot, and you wrote some, you wrote some stories when you were small, when you were young, but like serious writing.
Serious writing. Probably started when I was like, I'm gonna say serious writing when I'm 7. And what I mean by that, so what I don't mean is that what I wrote was somehow like, I don't think what I wrote was anything like particularly interesting or like worth saying, but I'm gonna say serious because I was serious at 7. And I also want to respect younger and much older people who are getting into it for the first time, and say as in like that too can be serious writing, even if the only person who reads it is you 5 years later cringing to yourself in front of your laptop, because that is me all the time. I look at the stuff. Sorry, I look at the things that I wrote and I'm like I don't and cringe internally, and I think lots of people do that. I think it's perfectly valid, but that doesn't mean it wasn't serious writing. And especially in a world where I think we need to hear so many more voices, it's all important. All of it's important.
We always cringe. I mean, as a much older person, I can tell
doesn't
you.
It doesn't show.
You will continue to cringe. So let's move on to your favorite authors. Who are your favorite authors?
So I'm just staring at my bookshelf now, trying to like pick which one wins.
It doesn't have to be one.
Okay.
You know, you can name us 3, 5, 10.
I think maybe it'll be easier to talk like, you know, like stages of life and what books spoke to me, right?
Yes.
I think when I was younger, as an early teenager, and even before that, so C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Charles Williams, another like basically about the same kind of writer. Sorry, I keep throwing Cantonese in. It's
fine. I speak Cantonese. That's my mother tongue.
Okay, I'm not great at Cantonese, but there's still a few phrases that I can't think of in English. So like
the thing with Malaysian is that, you know, we actually get the best of many worlds, because there are certain words, certain phrases from different languages that you can't find. Like my husband was just asking me yesterday, what exactly is kiasu and how do you explain it. So I ended up giving him like a 5-10 minutes lecture on what is exactly is kiasu, rather than, you know, afraid of losing. So it's like, okay, right. You need that special term because you can't really find any replacement word for kiasu in English.
I don't think that's an ontological experience. Black Friday, maybe in America, I don't know. I'm not an ethnographer of American history yet. But anyhow,
so when you were younger,
when I was younger, the old favorites like Lewis, Tolkien, and whatnot were very important to me. I think it was one of the things that I loved, and I think my I grew up in a very Christian household. And nominal, still attached to aspects of that tradition, but like I remember thinking a lot about the way language is used, especially in like the King James Bible, and it's still, even if I don't necessarily like everything in those Bibles now, I still very much like the way that those things were said, and I think that language has kind of percolated into the way I think and write. But I think as the years grew on, it was difficult, especially in the case of like Western fantasy, to visualize myself in that, because the bad guys really look more and more like Asians. If you like, the second time you read, like, oh, pointy helmets, yeah, okay, that's what you meant. This doesn't mean these people are evil or need to be canceled. I mean, I don't think canceling does very much, but I think at the same time, I think it's good that we keep filling things with new ideas and literature for us and by us as Asians or as Malaysians. So like, I think what happened in my high teen years was I also got a little bit more into a little bit of, I guess the epics, so Hikayat Hang Tuah, Monkey, the big, like, some Wong epics and whatnot. I think those gave me a lot of energy and imagination. I think, let me think. Dostoevsky was an important influence for me in high school because I was that sad boy. So I'm like, and now I'm moving to like my adult life and the Asian American, like Asian writers that I really like. Wu Mingyi might be a really big influence. He wrote The Man with the Compound Eyes. He's this Taiwanese author who writes about environmental devastation and loss, and also like finding hope in that in a very magic realist sense. So him, Salman Rushdie, of course, a lot of the people who use the imaginative to inscribe the present, I think have like very much resonated with me. Who else? Sorry, I'm just thinking of, recently I've been reading N.K. Jemisin, Octavia Butler, so a lot also Afrofuturism has been healing in that sense, because I think there's, I mean, Black people have started with very little, at least in America and in a lot of parts of the world, and have built beautiful epics of hope and love and strength that's neither completely cynical nor naive. And I think that particular, like, is something that we as other people in like the developing world, and like I'm not sure what Marx would call the masses. I'm not going to use this like fancy terminology, but all I mean to say is, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from Black women who write, and I think that's I see myself as an apprentice of that tradition, even if I'm never going to write in that tradition, until I give praise where it's due. Yeah,
that's good. So you've really gone through, the phases as you grow up. Reading different kind of literature in very well read, very big reader. So now, I guess your favorite genre is you read very widely, so can't really tell. I know fantasy.
My editor would say, like, Jason always calls it speculative fiction, so science fiction, but also fantasy. I definitely don't knock the genre. I read like fancy, like not fancy, but like the books that are written to win Pulitzers and Man Booker prizes are important to me. I still love reading Tasha and like Dan Tuan Eng. At the same time, I think my heart is still in the speculative. To borrow my mom's words, is in like she hates reading sad stories or like very hyper realistic movies. She goes, life is so hard. Way, and like what you go watch more hard things in a movie, and I'm like, that's a good philosophy, I guess.
Yes. I do tend to agree, and I go through also short period of time where when I'm feeling down, then I would definitely pick up something that can pick me up. Right. Rather than put me further down. Or some people that I know actually when they're feeling sad, they will pick up a sad book. They say, just let me bawl my eyes out, cry, and just express the emotion and be gone with. So yeah,
both work.
Whatever that whichever way that works for you, I guess. So I'd like to ask you, since your readers and a lot of our, well, all of our customers are also readers, and we always talk about pet peeves of readers, bookworms, what we don't like, certain habits that we dislike. Can I ask you if you have any bad habits that other bookworms will cringe?
I definitely dog ear my books. I write on the margins as well when I can help it. I mean, that's what the margin is for, to write extra stuff. That's why I got space. But
Okay.
like, on the other hand, like I feel like I like having physical books, but it also means that I'm not interested in like a pristine, perfect book. I'm interested in a book that is like been molded to me, to like the way it fits my hand. I don't mind if there are wrinkles on the cover, if that means that it, like, when I open it, it kind of like fits my very like short fingers.
So that they properly belongs to you.
Right.
They are your book.
But some people like really don't like that.
There's no right or wrong, I mean, of course, we always joke.
Except for the people who lend books that they've borrowed to other people.
Yes.
That's like a moral wrong.
Yeah, and then you don't see the book again.
Yep.
That's
all like water damaged.
Yeah, I've had a book that I lent to a friend and it came back water damaged. Yeah, and I really don't like to lend my books to anyone nowadays. I really don't.
That's hard.
Yes. So, right. It's been really interesting talking to you, Joshua. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you so much as well for this interview.
I wish you all the best. I hope, the book will continue to sell, and then we'll have second, third, fourth, and multiple reprints. Thanks a lot, Ada. I'm really happy for you, and, thanks for doing this. And when you're back, please contact us, and
absolutely.
hope
I
to
would
see you
love
in
to
person.
pop in the physical bookstore. Man, I have missed physical bookstores. I can't wait. I cannot wait. Thank you so much, Rachel.
So take care, stay safe, and all the best.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right.